Like it or not, revision is simply part of being a student, and like it or not, revision will make quite a big difference to the final grade that you end up with. Despite being students for many, many years by the time they sit their A-level exams, people are often coming to me asking for advice, tips, thoughts on how best to revise. And that's absolutely the right thing to do. Seek advice, talk to each other, talk to your teachers. This is Galbraith Does Psych, and I'm here today just to share a few thoughts and tips on what I think are some effective ways to go about revision. This isn't going to be a magic silver bullet. Revision takes time and effort, and you'll need to find a way of going about revision that works best for you. Although our brains are basically the same, the learning process is basically the same across people. Our upbringing, our personalities, our preferences, they will have an impact on what we get out of any particular learning experience. So as I said, you will have to kind of tweak things and find what works for you. Tip number one, as I said, learning takes time. Yeah? Revision is not something that happens right before the final exams. Yeah, you can't get through till, for example, January, February, March of year 13 and then go, oh, do you know what? I've got these A-levels coming up. I'm going to start doing some revision. Yeah, there will be a final push, yeah, before the final exams, but revision is something that needs to happen as early as possible. Yeah, from day one, preferably in year 12, you are going over your lessons. You are thinking about, how am I going to record this, structure this, restructure this, reprocess this, reflect on this to support my long-term learning? Yeah. But if you didn't do that, because let's face it, most people don't from day one. If you didn't do that, don't worry, it's never too late. Yeah, doing something now is better than nothing. Okay, so that's the revision wedge. The amount of revision is increasing over time, and you'll get to a point, you can see kind of at the end of the purple triangle, where you finish the course and you'll have a few weeks or whatever it might be to purely focus on revision. Yeah, but you should be increasing your revision load as you go through the course. Okay, let's talk about some specific strategies. These are going to be some of my favourites and some of the ones that seem to be most popular as I see it, and I'm just going to share some thoughts on how they work and how you might use them. Okay, so mind maps. I'm going to talk a little bit about flashcards, talk a little bit about practice questions, and explaining material or teaching somebody else, okay? But before we go into those and we look at some examples, just a couple of don'ts. So, effective revision. Don't listen to music. I mean, lots of students make the argument that it's going to, help them focus because they can tune out of everything else and they can get on with their work. And I do kind of see where they're coming from. But studies show that listening to music does not really support the learning and the recall process. Yeah, and we are psychologists, so we need to listen to that research. From things like retrieval failure theory, yeah, cue-dependent forgetting. If you've got the music there in the background when you're learning, and then you don't have it in the exam, it is a cue that is not there, and the absence of cues actually leads to forgetting. So, try not to distract yourself with music. Yeah, it divides your attention, and it's going to act as a cue that isn't there in the exam. I mean, if you're kind of learning through making things into songs or raps or whatever it might be, and in your head you're kind of using that in the exam to help, I can see there might be a little bit of value, but generally music does not really help revision. Okay, don't procrastinate. I know that's easier said than done, but going back to the revision wedge that I was just talking about, the earlier you start, the better. Yeah, even if it's just small steps. Revision feels, I think, like a big deal. Yeah, but break it down. Every little thing you do is better than doing nothing, even if it's just 10 minutes one day. Don't just put it off. Yeah? Tomorrow will eventually be the exam day. Yeah, think about that. Don't just read. Again, psychology research tells us. Go back to, I've done a video about the study by Harry Barrick et al., the yearbook study on LTM. Yeah? Revision should not just be reading, because you are not going to be tested like that. You need to test yourself using free recall as much as possible. So without your notes, without just looking at the textbook. It's very easy to lull yourself into a false sense of security, just reading your notes, reading the textbook and going, oh yeah, I remember that. But in the exam, you won't have that. Yeah? Practice free recall, and then your mind won't go blank so much in the exam. Finally, don't just make stuff. Yeah? Thinking about some of these techniques, mind maps, flashcards, so on. Lots of students feel very busy. They feel like they're revising because they've spent hours making mind maps and flashcards and rewriting their notes, but you have to actually use it as well. So I'll come on to that in a minute. Okay. Hands up if your mind maps look like this. Yeah, so someone that's been very productive, there's a lot on there. Great, fine. Yeah. You know, I heard a tip from a student once. When you're doing mind maps, make your writing small so you can cram all the content onto one mind map. No, don't do that. Do not do that. Yeah? Psychology tells us that the deeper we process material, the more we are likely to recall it in the long run. We know that the long-term memory encodes primarily semantically, yeah, according to meaning. So when you're doing a mind map, don't do that. Don't write everything. Don't write in full sentences. Summarize it. Yeah? Summarizing is deeper processing, and if you've watched my note-taking video, I've talked about that there a little bit as well. Summarize it right down, yeah? Use pictures instead of words if you can. Use colors. Link things together, yeah? Memory is associative. Yeah? We store stuff in networks. So you need to find links between things. And then all of the little bits in the links can act as cues for the rest of the memory. Okay, what might a good one look like? So when using mind maps as a learning tool in the first place, you might have half an hour or an hour to make something like this. Great. This is the kind of thing that I try to get students to do. So pictures, colour, very few words, colour-coded according to strengths and limitations here for this topic. This is the kind of thing we're aiming for. Yeah, we're processing much more deeply because we're thinking about what specific word do I need? What specific image might represent this concept? When it comes to actually using them, you're not going to be doing this in the run-up to the exams or to actually test yourself to recall. Yeah, this is, you know, the first step. This is the processing, the learning. Yeah, when you're actually using them to test yourself, you want to do. Sometimes it's called blurting or splurging or some variation of that. You want to start with a blank piece of paper. Don't worry about colours or anything at this point. Just take a couple of minutes. Get everything down on the page that you can remember. Empty your memory onto the page. What you then want to do is you want to bring your original back or your textbook back or your notes back. And you want to add in anything in a different colour that you didn't know. Yeah? That tells you what to focus on. But this is what I mean, the difference between making stuff and then using stuff. This that you can see on the screen now, this is a making stuff. That's important, but don't just do that. Then use the technique to actually test yourself. Yeah, go back to what I said about free recall. Start with a blank piece of paper. Okay. Flashcards. Very popular among students. I never really used them myself, but that doesn't mean that they won't work for you. Just think about how you're going to do them. My first point really about flashcards is that students go, oh yeah, okay, I'm going to do flashcards. And I'll check in with them every few weeks. How's it going? Yes, we're making flashcards. We've done this topic. I've got this to do. I've got that to do. And we'll get to, you know, Easter of year 13. Oh yeah, I've just got a last couple to make. I'm nearly there. Right, I've made them. Okay, but you've now got 2 weeks or whatever until the exams. And what we've missed is the using them. Yeah? Again, don't just make stuff, use stuff. They are a big job. Yeah? It might not feel like it at the start, but if you're doing them for every lesson or every theory or every study or every concept, you will end up eventually with a massive pile of flashcards. And unless you're actually going to see it through so that you can not only make them all, but then organise them and use them, then the whole thing kind of becomes a little bit pointless. So you might want to consider actually buying in some flashcards and then actually getting to the using. Now, honestly, that isn't really as good as making them yourself because they're going to be worded in a way that makes sense to you. They're going to be more specific to you, and you've done the processing in the first place. But if it's going to take you 6 months to make them, I'd suggest really thinking about, like I said, buying them so that you can get to the using. But that's up to you. If you're going to be dedicated and get on with it, it's probably better to make them. So how do we make them? Again, summarize. We know about depth of processing. Structure, colour. Think about it logically. How are you going to organise this stuff? Perhaps using different coloured cards for different topics or different papers is a good way to go. Don't just have the facts on there. Have questions and answers. Think about not only making them look nice, but making them usable. Yeah? So maybe a couple of questions on one side of the card that you can then flip over when you're using it to check yourself. In terms of using them, what I think is really, really helpful is making piles with them. And by that, I mean stuff that, you've tested yourself on and your recall's pretty good. You're not concerned about that as a topic area. Put that into a pile that you're going to test yourself maybe every 2 or 3 weeks on. Yeah? Stuff that you're struggling with a bit, put into a different pile. Maybe test yourself on that every 3 or 4 days or every week. Maybe make a third pile of stuff that you're just not remembering, you're really struggling with. Yeah? And is really key. Test yourself on that maybe every day or every couple of days. And as your confidence and your knowledge kind of goes up and down, move the piles around. Yeah, so that you're always into that pile you're doing every day or every 2 days, you're always putting your weakest areas there. So you're constantly topping them up. Yeah, you do not have time to revise every single part of the course every single day. So you have to be smart about what you're doing and when. Exam questions. Not too many downsides to this, to be honest. Just a couple of thoughts from me. To actually do exam questions, you need to know the stuff in the first place. Yeah? I know that sounds obvious, but you can't just get a practice paper and go, oh yeah, I'm just going to do this. Yeah? Until you're actually confident in the knowledge. So this probably isn't suitable as a first step unless it's being used to identify weaknesses. Yeah? The only comment apart from that I would make about exam questions is often students do them and then they go, okay, great, yeah, that went fine, or they'll hand it into a teacher or whatever. And honestly, it's great that you're wanting to hand this stuff into teachers, but teachers do not have time for everyone to do that. Yeah, so you're very lucky if you've got teachers that are able to kind of feed back on that extra stuff. But what you can do proactively for yourself is use the mark schemes. Yeah, all this stuff is available. And I'm talking about AQA, but it will be for other boards as well. It's all available. Look at it, read it, check it. It's not that hard. You might not know whether it's a 15 marker or a 14 marker out of an essay, but that doesn't really matter. Yeah, look at it even just in levels. That'll be fine. Read the examiner reports as well. They will give you a flavour of where students are misinterpreting questions. They will give you a flavour of areas that are strong, areas that are weak, and you can get a sense sometimes of, if the last couple of years they've tested something and it hasn't gone very well, maybe that will come up again soon. Yeah. Okay, teaching someone else or explaining the material yourself. This is really, really effective, but do try to have a specific aim. Don't just kind of say, oh yeah, I meet up with a couple of friends because we're going to explain some psychology. Have a specific aim. It's so easy to get derailed if you don't. It doesn't really matter who you do this with. You can do it with yourself if you've got nobody around. You could record yourself, listen back. You could explain it to your dog, your little brother, your little sister, your nan. It doesn't really matter, but ideally, to make it more effective, they will be someone that is patient, willing to be your guinea pig, willing to listen, but also someone that is curious and is going to ask you questions. Yeah, because when you're put on the spot, when you get a question that maybe you weren't quite expecting, that's your adaptability. That's testing your application. That's testing, do you really know it? If they say, oh, I don't quite get that last bit, can you use some different words, can you re-explain that? Then that is really testing your knowledge. So get them, not only to just quiz you on definitions and things, but get them to ask questions about what you've learned, to really test you. And again, ideally, they will be able to fact check you. Yeah, and you can even do this by yourself. As I said, if you record yourself, you can listen to yourself back and you can check off your right terminology and whatever it is with the textbook, with your notes in front of you. Yeah, because what you don't want to do is spend half an hour explaining something and then assume that that was all right and you know it, and then find out actually you had some misconceptions about that topic. Yeah. Okay, final few thoughts. Revision needs to be a structured, enduring, and purposeful activity. So I'm just going to share one way to look at revision. Your first kind of level of revision is on the organisational level. Yeah, and that's not just making sure you've got, a cup of tea in a textbook. That's making sure that you have got copies of specifications, revision lists if you've got a specific, exam coming up that is only testing part of the course, so that you've got everything you need to not only there and then sit and revise, but also to plan your revision. Once you've organised yourself, you need to do an audit. So this might be looking at tests you've already done, looking at teacher feedback, or kind of generating some feedback for yourself by blurting onto blank paper, whatever it might be. Yeah, but you need to work out where are your weak areas. Using the flashcards kind of sorting into piles technique I was talking about earlier, you've kind of done that audit phase there. Yeah, it kind of self-corrects. When you get things wrong, you put it into your more frequent pile. So that is your auditing. Those weaker areas you need to rehearse. Don't at this point just go, I'll start doing some exam papers. Actually go and relearn it or rehearse it. Yeah. Summarise, process it deeply, make links, do mind maps, repeat, rehearse. Once you think it's there, actually practice testing yourself. Yeah. Prove to yourself that it is there. Recall. You could do some questions at this point, but it might be you want something a little bit more safe, a little bit more low stakes. So find some quizzes or make some quizzes. Use your revision cards again, your cue cards, to test yourself using those questions that you'd put on there. When you're ready, the final goal is doing an exam paper. So you must, as part of your revision, you must sit and do timed papers. Yeah. Even just sitting and doing an exam paper, with a textbook to start with, I suppose is okay. But the closer you can get to the final conditions of the final exam, the better. Time yourself. Try and, beat your times or beat your scores, but stick to a time limit. Stick to sitting in silence for 2 hours, for example. Yeah, and when you've done that, that can then feed back into the process. Yeah. So identify your strengths and your weaknesses from those papers that you've done. That becomes your new audit. Yeah, so that you can move forward. This is structured. This is enduring. This is purposeful. This has been Galbraith Does Psych. I hope you found that useful. As I said, probably nothing absolutely revolutionary, but enough people asked me for thoughts and advice on revision, I thought that I would put this little video together. If you've enjoyed it, if you agree, if you disagree, whatever your thoughts, pop a comment below. Ask me a question. Thanks very much, guys. I'll see you in another video. Bish bash bosh.